Don't Tell the Newfoundlanders, the true story of Newfoundland's Confederation with Canada, written by Greg Malone. This book is dedicated to James T. Halley, a great Newfoundlander who believed that his countrymen and all Canadians deserved the truth. In December 1945, when the big announcement came from London, I was a law student at Dalhousie University in Halifax. James Halley told me. I and several other students were milling about in the hallways talking about this great news in the paper from St. John's, Newfoundlanders to vote on the future of government. We were very excited because we had been waiting for this for many years, and I and my friends had grown up under British rule since 1934, and now it seemed we were going to have elections and control of our government again. So this was a great moment for us. We were very optimistic about the future in Newfoundland in 1945. The war had been good to Newfoundland. We were prosperous with so much American and Canadian and British activity during the war. Newfoundland was central to wartime and civil aviation, with two of the largest airports in the world at Gander and Goose Bay. American, British, and Canadian airlines had landing rates in Newfoundland. The fishery was good, and it seemed that Labrador might well hold vast minerals and hydro wealth. So we were looking forward to a new and exciting future for our country. There were several of us there talking about what it all meant. Me and Lloyd's Soper, Abe Shipman, and George Hawkins, all law students. We talked about staying linked to Britain in some way, but mostly we talked about getting control of our government back and becoming an independent country once again, as we had been for almost 100 years. Then George Hawkins interrupted us. "Oh no," he said. "Newfoundland is going into Confederation with Canada. The deal is already done." We were stunned. I couldn't believe what he was saying to us. "Yes," he went on, "England sent people over from the Exchanger and the Dominion office to Ottawa in October, and the deal is done." "What deal? What are you talking about?" we asked. "Well, England is broke after the war, so Canada agreed to write off Britain's war debt to Canada and give them a big loan at low interest. And in return, Britain agreed to work with Canada to put Newfoundland into Confederation." I could not believe he was saying this. I just could not accept it. But I knew he wasn't lying. He knew what he was talking about because his father, Charles Hawkins, later a senator from Nova Scotia, was then a prominent member of the Liberal Party. "Yes," said George, "my father was with them, was with the team that negotiated the deal. It's all done." I was shocked. Surely I thought the British government would not do such a thing. They would not set up a national convention in Newfoundland just for show. Surely there were still some chance for the people to have a say and change the outcome. I returned home for Christmas 2 days by steamer. We used to travel by steamer then. It was great. All the talk in St. John's was about the coming national convention, but I could get no further information on what George Hawkins had said. That's a long time ago now, but what he told us that day has been on my mind ever since. I think of it all the time, and now I want the people of Newfoundland to see how it was done, and I want the people of Canada to know it because I don't think they would approve of it any more than we do. This account was one of the highlights in a series of conversations I had with Jim Haley about his recollections of the events that led to Newfoundland's joining Canada in 1949. The truth, as so often happens, he continued, is not commonly known. James Halley, Quebec, was a prominent member of the Newfoundland and Labrador legal community, a man of great presence, wit, and conviction. He was my friend and mentor for many years. I first met Halley during a public campaign in 1994 to stop the privatization of Newfoundland and Labrador's hydro and prevent it falling into the hands of its nemesis, Hydro Quebec. The success of that campaign empowered the people of Newfoundland and Labrador to hold on to a very valuable asset. Haley was an ardent nationalist and he supported anyone who might do some good for his beloved Newfoundland. The great injustice, as he put it, which had been done to Newfoundland in 1949, preoccupied his thoughts his entire adult life. He believed that the true story of Newfoundland's union with Canada had never been adequately told to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador or to Canadians elsewhere, and that this ignorance of their own history has put Newfoundlanders at a perpetual disadvantage in that great confederation. Over the years, Haley amassed a large collection of research material relating to the Newfoundland's federation with Canada. He became an expert on the tumultuous period of our history in which he himself had been an active player fighting for the return of responsible government. Haley wanted to tell the story of Newfoundland's entry into Confederation by using the word of the Canadians and British themselves in their own official documents and creating a brief chronological record of the most relevant and revealing passages in a way that would make his story accessible to the average reader. At the same time, it would create a paper trail of Canadian and British activities in Newfoundland from 1941 to 1949. Before he died in 2009, Haley extracted a promise from me to write such a book. He presented me with his collection of research materials, and over the course of 2008, I recorded many lengthy interviews with him on the subject. In the years since, I have added context and additional commentary to his basic framework. I hope the result proves worthy of his vision and that it will be useful to all those people who sense was something wrong. There was something not quite right about Newfoundland's entry into Confederation, but are not sure what went wrong. After 1949, the idea that Great Britain had conspired with Canada to place Newfoundland into Confederation with Canada was met with disbelief and derision in historical and political circles. Until the early 1990s, the official Joy Smallwood version of Confederation history, as written by the victors, was accepted almost without question. It held that Newfoundland had freely chosen federation with Canada without any interference from either Britain or Canada. Then, in the 1980s and 90s, official documents covering the period from 1941 to 1949 were released in Ottawa and in London, and they contradict the interpretation. Particularly useful are the documents on Confederation with Newfoundland, released by the Department of External Affairs in Ottawa, compiled and edited by Paul Brittle, a senior civil servant who had worked on the Newfoundland project throughout the 1940s. The Brittle documents, along with other sources, reveal a very different version of history, one more in line with popular belief in Newfoundland that with official account. The numerous dispatches, letters, and top secret memoranda between the highest levels of government in London and Ottawa make it clear that there was considerable sustained collusion between Canada and Great Britain to put Newfoundland into Confederation on Canada's terms, with a specific quid pro quo for Britain in return as the honest broker of the deal. The long and sorry record of the deliberate effort throughout this period to keep Newfoundlanders ignorant of these top secret deals and arrangements puts the entire effort into the category of conspiracy at the highest levels. The lofty ideals of democracy and self-determination for which 2 world wars had recently been fought and won were ignored. Newfoundland was not to share in that principled victory for which it had sacrificed so much. Self-determination seemed to be there, but on close inspection, it proved to be only a chimera, an elaborate show. Newfoundlanders did not determine their own future in 1948. Rather, it was determined for them by the government of Canada, Great Britain, and to a degree the United States. The gains of this conspiracy were all for Canada and Britain. The loss was all for Newfoundland, along with her sovereignty. Newfoundland lost her right to negotiate terms with Canada on an equal basis. That right was abrogated by Great Britain, which negotiated in its own interests. Newfoundland did not make the deal or even accept it. The terms of union with Canada were accepted by the Britain appointed Commission of Government of Newfoundland. The constitutional agreements whereby confederation between Canada and Newfoundland was effected were extraordinary, dubious, and as controversial in London and Ottawa as they were in St. John's. In 1949, Confederation was not effected through the British North American Act, which had been set up previously for that purpose more than 8 decades earlier, simply because Canada did not want to negotiate with an independent Newfoundland government. Instead, Canada preferred to negotiate with Britain while Newfoundland was temporarily under British control. So other means were employed outside the British North American Act, secretly and at considerable effort. To understand why Britain was able to hand Newfoundland over to Canada in 1948, we require some knowledge of how Great Britain came to repurpose Newfoundland in 1933. The year after a century of self-government, the legislature of the Dominion of Newfoundland, the oldest in the British Empire outside Westminster, was suspended. Great Britain once again assumed direct control of the island, and Newfoundland was reduced to the status of crown colony. This reversal was not only unique in the annal of imperial colonial history, but was completely opposed to the direction of thinking in the 20th century. It caused a stir in the Dominion's office at Whitehall, and Paul Evans, the parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Dominion Affairs, was moved to write. The idea of a Dominion reverting to the status of a crown colony was almost unthinkable. There was no provision in the imperial structure for such a contingency. Yet provision was made, once again at the Britons' insistence, as St. John Chadwick, the financial advisor to the Commission of Government, put in its time, the island has rung more constitutional bells than in any other colony.